Good morning, everybody. Auronnj here with another Final Fantasy VII EverCrisis video, and we're about a week away from the launch of EverCrisis, so it's time to do that infamous or famous or the tier list video that we always do first, where we take our information from the beta of a game, tell you which characters were the strongest, which characters were the weakest, what made them that way, and how they will project into the launch of this game. Now, keep in mind, in Final Fantasy VII EverCrisis, you're going to have access to every character in the game, but it's the character's weapons that you get from the gacha that unlock different elemental attacks, different physical attacks, buffs, debuffs, heals. Having access to those things is what makes these characters either stronger or weaker than other characters. Keep in mind, there will probably be balance patches that will rearrange this tier list a little bit. We will revisit this list pretty soon after launch, I imagine, but we know a lot from the beta, and I'm going to take that info, give you a tier list. Let's get into it. This is a fun video to make. It's always a fun video to do, and you're going to see that based on where some of these characters are, they were definitely probably meant to be there. And let's start with Cloud, the main character of Final Fantasy VII. It should surprise no one at all that he's going into the S tier. Cloud is a single target DPS professional. That's what he does. He exists to kill bosses. This is a PvE game, so killing bosses is a huge deal in this game. Keep in mind, we had access through the gacha system to a piece of equipment for him, a gear, an armor set that boosted his lightning damage, and a lightning damage up sword. We also fought a lot of enemies that were weak to lightning damage. So did that maybe boost his numbers a little bit? I'm sure it did, but he never felt weak. In fact, he was consistently the strongest person in parties. When I had him in there, he's an easy S tier character. Looking on the screen, you'll see the Murasame. That's his lightning weapon. That's probably going to be one of the first banners we have in the game. And if it also comes with his lightning equipment, his lightning armor set, it's calling it armor is weird. His lightning outfit, let's call them outfits. If it comes with his lightning outfit, that's going to be one of the strongest combos of gear that we have access to in the game. He also had a couple weapons I want to mention. Hard Edge, a single target physical damage move that decreased defense, very useful. And then Crystal Sword. He's not the best healer in the game, but Crystal Sword does give him access to AoE healing, and you just have to have AoE healing. It's non-negotiable, or at least it felt non-negotiable in the beta. You have to have AoE healing. So if you don't have Aerith's weapon or one of the other weapons in the game for better AoE healers, Cloud can do that for you. You're going to have to find somebody else to do some physical DPS for you if he's always healing, but he does have that. It is a feather in his hat. He's great. He's S tier. Let's just move on to the next one. Now, next up, we've got Barrett. I'm going to slide Barrett into the A tier. He was good in the beta. Based on my notes, like here's what I wrote about him. He was amazingly cheap at debuffing the enemy. Very important, by the way, debuffs, don't sleep on debuffs in this game. Enemies will wreck you and are hard to kill. You are on a battle timer. You have to survive them and kill them. He helps you do both of those things, and he does a lot of AoE damage. Now, that's really good for killing the ads that come with bosses and wave clearing. Most things in this game, like I said, are a time trial. Having AoE damage, don't sleep on it. It is important. But here's kind of Barrett's best weapons. These are his best abilities and why I think he's an A tier character. With the War Machine, you have access to a 2 ATB. Notice where it's like on Quick Burst, that skill, it says ATB and there's 2 marks to it. That's a very cheap skill to use, and it decreases the defense of the enemy. It's a cheap enough skill that you can constantly keep it up. What this does for Barrett is not only make him a good AoE wave clearer, but also makes him useful in a boss fight as your secondary DPS / debuffer, so you don't have to make Cloud debuff the enemy's defense or your main DPS debuff the enemy. Barrett can keep that debuff up. Your other attacker can be putting in the damage, and then your other like true support can be doing the heals, stuff like that. Then you see a couple other weapons on the screen there that are some of his AoE damage. Enemy Launcher, for example, hits all enemies. Those are a little bit more expensive, but they are very useful. Barrett was a very useful guy in the game. Was he overpowered? No, but did he have his uses? Absolutely. Even in boss fights, A tier character. Okay, next up, we've got Tifa. Tifa, I wanted Tifa to be an S tier character, but I'm going to slide her in next to Barrett in the A tier. What I wrote down for Tifa was she was really a secondary damage dealer, once again focused with debuffs. So I put a couple of her more prominent weapons in the game up here to give you an idea of what she did. With the Tiger Fang gloves, this was big damage, 750% damage, and then it magic attack decreased the boss. Then look at Sonic Striker, again 750% physical damage when fully leveled up or whatever, but it's a physical damage move, hits one enemy, but what it does to that enemy is attack is decreased. When you are fighting the harder bosses in the game, it is important to nerf their attack or their magic attack based on which ones they do. Tifa has access to Tiger Fangs and Sonic Striker, so you can equip which one of those that you need. She can either physically debuff the boss's attack or magically debuff the boss's attack, depending on which attack you need debuffed. That's very useful. So much like Barrett, a secondary damage dealer, but brings crucial debuffs to your team, a mix of damage and support, A tier character. Let's move on to the next one, and we're sticking with Final Fantasy VII, and we get to Aerith. Now with Aerith, this is a S tier character. Aerith, I said earlier, you need AoE healing in your group. Aerith has one weapon that makes her S tier. Now look, it's not the only good weapon Aerith has, but it is the thing that makes Aerith Aerith. Fairy Tail. Curaga A++. Magic heal is cast at a 67% potency to your whole group. It is very expensive to cast. It's one of the things you have to worry about with her. You kind of need Aerith to just constantly be doing her little auto attack loop, building up her ATB, and then being able to Curaga your group when you need it. But it's such a good heal. This thing saved my skin so many times. It's just, you're going to want this weapon at some point. It's that good. It's what makes Aerith S tier. Does she have access to other magic damage types? Yes. Can she do AoE damage? Yes, she can. Can she do physical damage? Yes, she can. Will some of those damage types be important in certain fights? Yeah, it depends on what the enemies are weak to, but Fairy Tail is the thing that sets her apart. It's a thing that makes her an S tier character. Best healer in the game. Aerith in the S tier. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, we've got Red the 13th, who, as a little bit of an aside, I called Red the 13th Red the 8th my entire childhood. Little me did not understand Roman numerals very well. I saw a Roman numeral with 3 lines and I was like, oh, it's Red the 8th. My best friend also thought that, and it was a bit of a culture shock to me when I figured out that he was actually Red the 13th. That's still hard for me. Now, as far as where Red the 13th goes on this tier list, he's going to go into B tier. He felt about the weakest of the characters we had in the game. Wasn't worthless. I'm not putting him in C or D, but one of his core mechanics was regenerate, regen, and it felt weak. Like, Red felt to me like somebody who kind of didn't know what he was doing as much as some of the other characters in the game did. He had small AoE heals, well, smaller than like Aerith anyway, so that was okay. And regenerate, I really like the idea of how it could work in the game. It just felt weak. I felt like regen is going to be something that's going to be buffed, and when it is, Red will go up the priority list. If you look at his gold collar there, it applies regen to your group and has a little bit of a heal, but the heal potency is only 9% compared to Aerith's like 60-some% potency heal. He also has like AoE magic debuffs. He can do a lot of magic type damage. He's a magic type character. If regen gets buffed, if it's something that in like boss fights can keep your group alive, he's going to be a great character. That's not the case right now. I just felt like his healing was a little weak, so I had him in B. He just felt like maybe one of the worst characters of the game, but not bad. Like I said, he's not in C tier, he's not in D tier, he's just in B. Just needs a little love to catch up to his friends from the mainline Final Fantasy series. Now, we're done with main Final Fantasy VII characters for now. I'm sure there will be more released later. And so that brings us to Zack. Now, here's the deal with Zack. He's another boss killer. Much like Cloud, his, BFF over there, Zack is somebody who's meant to kill bosses. In my experience, he was not as good as Cloud was, but keep in mind, Cloud had banners. We were all pulling for Cloud's weapons and Cloud's outfits. Maybe Zack does catch up to Cloud once he gets a little bit of love. I have him in A tier. He doesn't have that like AoE healing weapon that Cloud has, if you kind of need to spot that in, but he is an amazing boss killer and his weapons will kind of show that off. The Zweihander over here, 940% physical damage. Oh my goodness, with a little critical hit rate boost on there. This thing will do a ton of DPS. Then he has ability the ability to debuff both physical defense and magical defense for the bosses, with the arc sword kind of turning him into a single target magic damage dealer, or the cutlass turning him into a single target physical damage dealer. I felt like these were his strongest weapons coming out of beta and really highlighted what Zack is supposed to do. He gets in there, he's got his big sword, he cuts bosses down with that thing, and he's pretty dang good at it. So I like Zack overall. I think he's a great unit. If he's somebody who you want to play because you're a Zack fan, you're gonna go nuts with him. You're gonna have a great time. I hope he gets some featured banners soon after the game comes out. Give him some outfits that further enhance what he does, like his buddy Cloud does. Okay, let's move on. It's time to go in to the game that nobody really knows what it is. It's the Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale game that didn't really have a story attached to it, but we're getting the story in evercrisis, and the story was really good. It also is going to have young Sephiroth in it. I think it's one of the most intriguing things that this game's going to have on launch is the story of Matt, Glen, and Lucia, and their just entry into Soldier. Also, it has one of the strongest characters in evercrisis, in my opinion, in Matt. Now, for Matt, let me tell you what I wrote down about Matt. I said Matt was an amazing boss fighter. He is, and he's the second best healer in the game. Aerith is the best healer, or was the best healer in beta, no doubt about that, but Matt comes in second. Matt comes in second. Let me show you some of Matt's weapons here and kind of give you an idea of what he can do. So Stingray is a magical damage attacking weapon that decreases magic defense. Okay, should sound familiar to somebody like Zack. Slick Beetle is a physical damage move that debuffs attack. Now, attack debuff with single target. This means he will mix well with somebody like a Cloud if you want to run him as a second damage dealer, so they can both be hitting with big single target attacks. Cloud can debuff the defense, Matt can debuff the single or the physical attack. That's a nice little combo, but let's look at Prime Number, the weapon on the bottom here. This is an AoE heal, 67% for all allies. Healing Strength Up is on there. It's almost as good of a heal as Aerith's. So not only is Matt a boss killer, which I value a lot in PvE games, but he's also a very good AoE healer, which you kind of have to have. I think Matt could be an Aerith replacement, or at least somebody in certain fights where you maybe want some of the utility that his weapon set brings. Could be a Aerith replacement in that case. Keep in mind, guys, I'm showing you a small sample of what I consider these units' best weapons in the beta. I do have info on all their weapons, and I might do a breakdown for every character. Just trust me, Matt is sleeper as like a sleeper candidate for one of the better units in the game. Next up, let's talk about Glen next. Now, Glen, okay, I'm back and forth on Glen. I'm going to put him in A right here, but Glen, he floats between A and B for me. I wrote down A on my notes, so I'll just keep it on A. I really only have one weapon, though, that I want to talk a lot about with Glen. What I wrote for him was this. He's a lot like Barrett, a sub debuffer, or he's a sub attacker slash debuffer. Here's an idea of what he does. Piece of cake right here. 360% physical element damage to a single enemy. You can see that modifier, not nearly as high as those other single target attacks, but decreases defense, and again, that cheap ATB move. Now the difference here, this is only a single target debuff. This is why, I'm going to move him back down to B. I'm going to drop him down here into red tier. Barrett does this to the whole group, right? They're both sub damage dealers. They're both debuffers. They both have cheap debuffs. Matt's is just single target. Now, most of the time, you're only going to care about that really being on the boss. But in timed game modes, that AoE debuff might be a big deal. Glen, this is Glen. Glen just feels a little bit weaker than Barrett to me from the beta, so I'm going to put him into B. I hope he's somebody who gets a lot of love because his weapons look really cool. Big hammers and like sights and stuff like that. He's got a lot of coolness to his name. He's very usable. I'm going to put him into B tier. And then lastly, we have Lucia. Lucia is going to also be a B tier character for me, and I can already hear people blowing back on this, people coming back at me for this one. I use this girl to her fullest potential that I could in the beta. I really tried to make her good, and she was consistently outshone. Now, I want to mention a couple things here. She has the potential to be one of the best characters in the game, but either silence, which is an ability that would prevent bosses from using abilities, was bugged in the beta, or you're not supposed to be able to silence bosses in this game, or I never really got silence to do much of anything, and I kept trying. I tried over and over to be like, okay, I'm gonna beat this hard boss by dropping silence on them from Lucia. It just never worked. I don't know, it never silenced anybody. If it was bugged and they fix it, okay. Now we're talking about a unit who can prevent bosses from doing these like huge attacks that you see coming. Oh, she would be insane. She could be S tier in that case. But if it's not meant to be that good, well, then she's not that great either. Let's see, her other thing she could do. So that's what the black rifle does. We do have the pulse gun as well, which is a single target water damage move. This is an example of how elements matter a lot in this game. She has the only like single target big DPS water move, so that's useful. And then she also had the only AoE wind move. So you can see why she's B and not like C or D. I just think like eventually we'll have access to those other elements for other characters. And if those other characters already do more, that they'll still be better. Look, make Black Rifle great again or for the first time, and Lucia will fly up this tier list. Until then, I've got her sitting at B, and I actually realized I have a nice little square here. Cloud, Aerith, and Glen at the top, Barrett, Aerith, and Zack in A, Red, Glen, and Lucia in C. So that's my takeaway for the beta. Let me know if you played in the beta, how you felt about those characters. Let me know which characters you're the most excited to pull for when this game comes out. I'm really looking forward to it. We're about 8 days away from the time of filming this video. Let's go. Let's go. I'll be streaming this game a lot when it comes out. So look forward to seeing you there. Have a great one, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.